You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 27. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
And visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, example, discussion, and more.
Send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at Coding Blocks and follow us on Twitter at Coding Blocks, or head to www.codingblocks.net and find all our social links there at the top of the page. With that, welcome to Coding Blocks. I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zack.
And I'm Michael Outlaw.
And first, we wanted to start with a little bit of news. We got a lot of feedback on our last episode. Thank you very much. That was the one we were talking about puzzles and algorithms and design patterns. And one of the things we were trying to figure out was basically, how to really express the difference between design patterns and algorithms. And we got a lot of really good feedback and tweets and emails about this and comments. And I just want to mention my favorite was from Andy Joyner, who said, if an algorithm is a recipe, then roux would be a pattern. And I had to look this up because I hadn't heard of roux before. But
I think that's like Tigger's friend.
Roux? I don't know, man. That's a little too old for me. You just aged me out there.
What? Who doesn't know about Winnie the Pooh?
I remember Pooh.
Anyone born in like 1990 and up? Like me?
Tigger's still a thing. There was a whole movie.
All right. But anyway, so I had to look up what roux was, and that's ROUX. And it's basically this kind of mixture that you can make a bunch of different ways, and it doesn't really matter. But the gist is that it's 50% fat and 50% flour, which is amazing.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I will be cooking with some roux in the near future.
Yeah, I have some more I want to add to this topic that we'll get to in a bit, but just know that that's coming.
All right.
Yeah.
Who wants to mention it?
Yeah.
Somebody found my office.
Yeah. So Sam wrote us directly to comments at Coding Blocks, and
you could too,
and you absolutely can. But it was fantastic because he sent in a screenshot of
Singleton's Architects.
Singleton Architects.
I screwed it up.
Only the architects was plural. Which still, though, I think we need to open up a ticket for this thing. Bugzilla, Jira, whatever your ticket platform of choice is.
You guys are missing the point.
There's not. It can't be plural. There's a bug in their name.
You know, I'm looking forward to the day when you're going to have to start talking about architects as building architects, and it's just kind of implied that it's software. It could happen.
Maybe. All things become virtual in this world.
I know a girl who would be very upset by me saying this, so. Ha.
Yeah, that was actually really cool. He tweeted it. We'll put a link in the show notes, but it was excellent. We all got a good laugh out of that one, so we appreciate that.
I still don't understand why they would name it that way, though, because even if they were referring to the mathematical term for Singleton, it's still wrong.
Yeah,
there should only be the one. It's like the Highlander.
You guys wondered who the real nerd was here.
Yeah, now you know. And big thanks to Ollie724 for the review. You're awesome.
It was a fantastic review. Thank you for taking the time to do that.
Oh, yeah, we greatly appreciate those. Those are awesome. I did have one that I wanted to comment. There have been some episodes before where, I've made a joke here and there. Maybe. And so my youngest, he came home from school today, and he had one for me that I thought I would share with you guys. So what did one developer say to the other developer?
I don't know. Stop commenting out my stuff. I don't know.
Want to get a bite to eat?
Oh, nice.
Very good.
Very good.
Yeah, so I couldn't resist throwing that in there.
That's a good one.
Nice and cheesy. I like it.
Yeah, well, he's talking about pizza. All right. So, and then along the topic of, me, recently, my mind was blown here. So last episode, we were talking about the puzzles and everything, and Project Euler came up. And then someone had to correct us and say that it's pronounced Euler, so it's Project Euler.
Yes, and I know we all Googled this ourselves.
It was what was it? Who the
Cadkins511 on Twitter.
Yeah. What? No, it's Euler. I've never I can't even look at that and think Euler.
Yeah. Well, what's funny to me is maybe it's an American thing, but I saw the name and it never crossed my mind, to look up how it might be pronounced. I'm just like, oh, that looks like Euler.
Well, I mean, how do you say Europe, right? EU, it's you.
Yo-yup.
So yeah, thanks for correcting
From
us.
now on, it's oil rope.
We were absolutely, all of us were like, really?
Yeah, it makes me feel very dumb and very redneck. All these years of talking about Project Euler, guys, it's awesome.
But you know
He
what? You're
even
not the
gave
only
a
person.
link though to the Wikipedia article that had.
Yeah.
Yeah, had the
guy's name and
pronunciation and
pronunciation in
everything. Yeah, but it's not just us. Like I've had other people mention that site to me, and it's
I've
always
never once had anyone referred. I've never heard anyone once refer to it as Euler.
Euler.
Yeah.
Yeah, Euler, and that's really it. If you search for EULER,
Mind blown.
it'll actually Google will take you to a YouTube video that says Euler.
Nice.
Euler. So yeah.
And next time you're talking about with your programmer friends, you can actually pronounce it the right way, and they're all going to look at you like you're, something special.
Yep. Oh, and so here's something that came up. Also, our friend Sam, who sent the picture of Outlaw's hidden cave somewhere.
It wasn't very hidden.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was
If
actually
I was
kind
trying to
of.
hide my cave, I was doing a poor job of it.
But it's like he said before he listened to this podcast. He said he'd probably walked by it 1,000 times and never noticed it. But then when he saw that after listening, he was like, that's kind of funny, right? So
He found the Bat Cave.
he did. Well, he actually asked, hey, could we go to doing a more frequent format like daily or at least more frequent? And it's something that we would love to do, but we've never really sat down and tried to, because we put a lot of time into
I'd like a
coming up with
Ferrari.
content. Yeah, I'd like Ferrari.
I mean, if we're talking about things I'd love,
So really, we kind of want to get you guys' feedback. Find out, if we went to something with like a shorter format, maybe a quick question or something here and there, and we did maybe 10 or 15-minute episodes. Is that something that people would want, or do you guys like the format it is? I mean,
Yeah, we'd love to hear what you say. Like, obviously, some larger topics need more time, and some things don't need a lot more time. So we want to know: is that good or bad? Would it be annoying if you heard a 5-minute episode or a 10-minute episode,
or a 20.
or do you love the hour-and-a-half episodes we've been doing? I don't know.
yeah. And so
Yeah, we've definitely talked about some different ideas for it and thrown them around.
Yeah, so do us a favor. I mean, when you listen to this, head to www.codingblocks.net/poll, Poll, and let us know. Because we would truly love to get your feedback on that. And some more about
me,
Mike.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rename this episode to be about me. So, yeah, I need to make a retraction. So, in last week's tip of the week, I talked about using git bash in the tab completion, and it totally works awesome for tab completion on the branch name, which is where I originally started that. But I swear I've used it on like file names as well. But then since that episode, and since you brought up the question about like, I think it's a git bash integration thing, I've gone back and tried other scenarios, and I'm like, I must have just gotten lucky on other times, because like where I thought I could, I swear I could remember doing this, where if I wanted to do like a git add in a file name, or a git diff in a file name, or a git reset in a file name, or a git checkout in a file name, I could have sworn that if you started typing in parts of the file name, it would, and then you tab, that it would be smart enough to show you only the file that was
In the cache or whatever.
relevant to what you're trying to the command you're trying to do, to like one that has actually changed or been modified or something like that, right? But I wasn't able to re-simulate that this week. So then it made me think like, oh man, every time I must have done that before on the file name, maybe I was just getting lucky,
Or it was in
that
the same
I had
directory.
already typed in enough distinctiveness about
Yeah.
the file name. Because like I remember the reason why this seems so distinctively like in my mind is that there have been times where I could remember doing the tab, and depending on how many files I had, either unstaged or in the directory or both, there have been times where I could remember like it would take, like there was a noticeable pause while it was trying to figure out like which file name to display, right? And that's why I was like, I was sure it was doing this on more than just the branch name, but I couldn't reproduce it. At least within the last few days, I haven't been able to reproduce it. So it just made me like feel like, okay, I just got to retract that. Like it's fine if you want to use the tab for the branch name, but
Interesting.
I think my memory might have served me wrong there on the rest.
So Outlaws going back to GUI. Forget. All right.
Whoa, that was a stretch.
I actually have a correction to make over last episode, and we actually had somebody write in about it. It frustrated me when I realized it. I kept saying topcode.com. It's topcoder.com. The R on the end is apparently important when you type in a URL. So it is www.topcoder.com. So
I don't like the way you enunciate the "der."
Coder. Well, I mean, it was missing. So www.topcoder.com.
It sounds a little too redneck with your accent.
Who's got an accent?
Oh, fighting words. Here it goes.
Who's got an accent right here? It's not me. So yeah, sorry for the mistake. I did actually make it correct in the show notes. So if you were looking at the show notes or the resources, you would have had the right link. But yes, if you just listened and tried to go over there, you were getting a 404. So I apologize for that. Yeah.
At least it was a 404. It could have been much worse.
Yeah, it could have.
Oh God.
So we got some bad news.
I don't. Do we have to talk about this?
Yeah, I think we do. So this is we're kind of breaking up the gang here. So
Well, I don't think we're the ones responsible for breaking up the band.
that's a good point. So Joe, you want to go ahead and
I am moving. Right now, we are all basically in the northwest Atlanta, Georgia area, and I am leaving the area. I'm moving back to where I basically got some family and some warm beaches and sunny air or something. So I am moving to Central Florida region, particularly Brevard County. So if you guys live around there, and I know that some of you do, then give me a shout. You'll be seeing me at some of those meetups now.
So basically, this is our last episode.
No, no, no! Don't put that out there. But the one
And
reason
which one
why,
of us is the coding blocks? Someone must carry on.
Oh, well, it's not a singleton. There could be more than one.
That's a good point, right?
I guess we're just going to have to keep doing them then.
These are delegates. Apparently, we're going on.
So one reason why I wanted to bring this up, though, or at least why I put it in the show notes, I don't really like talking about it, though, is that a little bit of behind the scenes, though, for you, dear listener, is that I know that amongst the three of us, we've actually discussed this, the extreme luck, you might call it, or dumb luck, you might call it, that we stumbled upon with, if you only saw just how little we've invested into what we use to record these episodes, but yet the quality of which they come out with, we're always, we're pretty impressed with it. Some
even
audio
ourselves.
technician might correct us, but we think that considering how little we have invested into the equipment, the audio quality comes out pretty nice. And a part of that is that we are fortunate in that we are all sitting across from one another, so we don't have to worry about any kind of networking.
The audio quality as the water's running.
Yep. Toilet flushes
man.
upstairs.
Well, okay. So there's some little background things here and there. It adds some color to it. But one of the concerns though is that now that we're going to be forced to do remote recording sessions, what impact is this going to have on the overall quality of the show? So hopefully we'll be able to sort that out. We've got some ideas and things that we're going to do. So hopefully we're going to be able to sort that out and you won't be able to tell any difference. However, I do ask that you have some patience with us in the next few episodes, just in case if there are some kinks that we're working out during that time.
Yeah, but I mean, one of our top goals, we all agreed when we first started this thing that we all listen to podcasts, and we can't stand listening to podcasts with bad audio. Like it's incredibly frustrating. So we're going to do our very best to make sure that we bring you high quality sound and all that, so that it continues to be the same quality. I don't know. Nobody's ever really asked. Do we even want to talk about the equipment we use for this?
Nah,
Not here.
save that for something
All right.
else. There's
Moving on.
other shows that talk about how to podcast.
Yeah, but nobody does it like us.
That's right. It's going to be good, though. Well, we're not going to do anything crappy, so we'll be all right.
Yeah. We aim for somewhat high standards.
Somewhat high. I like how you
Right.
somewhat high.
Somewhat. All right. So status report. Outlaw, what you got?
What's status report on?
New
Like a
Year's
deer in
resolutions of
headlights.
2015. So we are talking, 4 months ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, not really a whole lot to report. I did actually decide, okay, fine. I mentioned before, I would just pull up some Pluralsight stuff and go from there with it. And I actually did, start one, but then I realized, oh, you know what? I got other stuff to do that's more important to my day to day. So I don't know.
You're talking about a Ruby course or what?
Yes, a Ruby course. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, at this point, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to it because there's so many other topics that are far more interesting to me.
Call of Duty.
Yeah, that's definitely one. You want to talk about some Call of Duty? Let's bring it. Come on, man.
He's prestiged 80 times.
Favorite weapon? Come on, let's talk. Call of Duty. I'm going to the SMGs right now. Jesus. Personal favorite is KF5, which is always, that's a default.
All right, how about you, Joe?
That's a little...
Any status report?
Man, I've been so busy with this move. I've actually given myself shingles, maybe, which is contagious, by the way. So don't touch anything in my house.
Awesome. He tells us this now.
Yeah. This is literally the first time we're hearing about this.
As we record out of his basement.
Excellent.
That's right. Sorry. So, I've done Jack this time. So, we'll see.
All right, so me going back to, all right, so I've only got 30 views on that YouTube video I put together. It's kind of hurt my feelings. So if you would, just
I don't think closures are that popular. I think that's the takeaway.
I don't think I named it well. But yeah, seriously, if you guys haven't checked it out, please do, because I'd even like to get some feedback on, what you would like to see done better or worse or whatever. I mean, I can always make it worse. And then going to the Angular thing, so it's frustrating when you're trying to put together a course because you start looking and you're like, well, Angular 2 is on the horizon, right? And you know what? I was like, hey, let me go ahead and move towards Angular 2 because that's where it's going to be here in the near future. The problem is I went and looked at it. It is it's not even near beta or anything like that. You can't find any information on it unless you're going to dig through source code and figure out how to write the code yourself. There's literally nothing out there.
But the source code is the best documentation you can find.
Okay. Bah. Yeah. Boo. Yeah. So
that's you don't agree.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So actually,
that meme gets overplayed.
So I don't know if we can put that on this one too, because it's going to end up in every one of our episodes.
Right.
I think we use it a lot.
So here's the interesting thing: the angle that I'm taking on this is. I see
what you did there.
I'm trying to create what you would do in a business, an enterprise type thing. So you're going to have a login and you're going to have assets that are locked down and all that kind of stuff. So I am going with the Angular 1.3 approach right now, but I'm trying to keep this thing open so that I could basically plug and play another UI. So maybe I'll do something like React in the future or I don't know. But that is the direction that I'm heading with that. And I have put a little bit of time into it, although with the NBA playoffs on right now, wow.
Sports.
It's hard to focus. Hey, my Atlanta Hawks are 2-0 in the playoffs. That hasn't happened, I think, ever. So it feels good.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we've mentioned this before, because I'm definitely not trying to steal any thunder, but there's a book, I think it's called The Java Framework Guide. It compares Angular, Backbone, and Ember. And what it does, I think, is kind of similar to what you were talking about, maybe, where
Eventually.
it takes one, let's say, problem domain or application, right, and then it creates that same app in each of the different frameworks.
Yep.
That way you can focus on what are the actual differences between
the different UI frameworks. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I'm doing it, and it's also a nice proof of concept from what we used to have with web forms and that kind of thing, where your code was so intermingled with your UI and everything that if you do this the proper way nowadays, you can just about lift and replace if you want.
So, are you saying that Hello World isn't a valid starting point?
Oh, it's a great starting point. So actually, one of our good buddies is doing something along this lines, right? He's taking a bunch of different server backends and then a bunch of client front ends and trying to do just different pieces on them. And so it's going to be kind of interesting to hear how his turns out. So it's definitely a challenge. It takes a lot of time to sit down and put something like that together. So
well, good.
All right, so now I guess we're getting into it's kind of a mixture of questions and feedback type things that we've got in this episode. So the first thing we want to talk about,
this is, in case we haven't already said, this is our SYN-ACK episode. You know, you send us a SYN packet to synchronize, and we ACK it with an answer.
Yeah, we're basically reducing our, I don't want to call it technical debt, but we've been kind of bad about responding to things that you guys have sent us, and this is us kind of paying down some of that debt.
And we are completely taking the TCP route of it, to where if packets get dropped, you know, we can't really be responsible for, or actually the UDP, right? We're just going to blast them out.
You asked the question?
Yeah. So we're just going to throw random packets your way. So we'll see how this goes. So the first one we got is one that was sent to us a while back, and we're just now getting to it. No, actually, this one was recent. This is from Matthew Dougal, and he basically had a question on naming things, and he's not necessarily talking about naming conventions like variables and methods and that kind of stuff, not like upper or camel casing or any of that. He's basically saying he finds himself in the situation to where, you know, he'll spend a lot of time sitting there going, do I call this a log manager? Do I call it a log agent? Do I call it a log service? What do I call this? Like, what's the difference between
Logger?
Or he had another one that was a great one was,
I'm going to take the Ren and Stimpy approach and just call it log.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually want to talk about these because we've all got some probably almost embarrassing times where you sit there and you think about something for 45 minutes and you're like, oh dear God, just name it. Right?
Yeah, and there's so many times when I'll name something a manager, which is usually a bad sign. It's a sign that I'm doing something incorrectly and kind of doing too much in one class. But yeah, it gets really hard to name things.
Yeah, it does. And he had another one that's a great example of, do I call this thing a helper or do I call it a utility class? And really, I mean, they're essentially the same type thing for the most part. So you're not alone, dude.
You know what's worse? I do this too often. Is like I'll name a class something like we'll call it a log validator. And, I start off writing some validation code, and then the time moves on. I kind of maintain it a little bit and kind of add some abilities. Next thing you know, my validator class is creating files and moving things around. and I've never changed the class name in the meantime. So not only have I bundled this crap together, but the name is also misleading.
Yeah, and honestly, like, now, one thing I will say, he said that...
okay, so your helper versus utility, though, wasn't there something about the
yes,
utility doesn't have state?
Yeah, a utility. So we found this link, and we'll include it in the show notes on Stack Overflow, where a guy actually had a nice breakdown, and he basically said, like, if you have a utility class, there is no state. You can't instantiate it. Every method is static, and so the utility class is something that you just, you call and use. Helper,
so like, what's the example function that you would have in a utility class?
Trim, right? Like, let's say that there wasn't such a thing as a string.trim or whatever. You could have a string utility class, and it would have a trim function. You'd pass a string into it and it would return it, right?
Or like pretty format date or something.
There you go, something like that. Granted, a lot of these things exist. That's just a stupid, simple example. Now, in that Stack Overflow article, the guy, not really article, but answer, the guy said that, a helper class is essentially the same type thing, except it can have state. Now, I don't know where these definitions are coming from. I've never actually seen this laid out anywhere before, but just know that they're very close to the same type thing. And naming these, generally speaking, I would probably just kind of follow suit with what's already in your application elsewhere, right? Like, if people have utils class, then maybe follow the utils naming.
Yeah, consistency is important.
Yeah, and it might be more important than actually naming it completely properly, right?
But that's if you're talking about specifically about utils, though. I mean, there have definitely been times for, like, new classes or even namespaces where, like, I've started down one path with, where I thought that I might, what I might want this thing to look like. And then along the way during the development process, I ended up deciding, you know what, I really feel like this other name would better suit it, what it's actually become. Now, once that's been committed, though, once that's out there in the wild, then I'm not so much on the changing. But
yeah,
I pretty much leave it at that point.
That's kind of hard. I mean, I'll change it. I'll refactor stuff if I think that it belongs, like what he just said about having, like, some log validator. Like,
if it's something like, if it's a really horrible
It doesn't
name,
fit
like
anymore.
the name, yeah, like in the example that he gave, where it's no longer validating stuff, where it's doing a lot more than just validating, then yeah, sure, refactor it. But I was thinking of like much less extreme examples where it's like,
Yeah, so another one that I will say, he mentioned something about a framework. I just about never name anything framework because that usually is something.
And when can I call something a framework?
Because that is so much larger. Like when you look at what
I don't think he meant the name of it though.
Well, when you call something a framework, it's usually like you're not writing much of your own code for it. You're using stuff that other people have provided, right? Like that. When I think of a framework, that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't talking about naming his thing a framework, because he says, and when can I call something a framework? I'm so used to hearing that word describe web frameworks that it's made me second guess my usage of it.
Right. So I don't really know what he's saying.
Well, I feel like he's kind of almost like implying the difference between like a toolkit and a framework. And to me, like a framework is like, when you have a framework, you have like a prescribed way of doing things. Like these are the types of problems you're solving with my framework, and here's basically how you solve them with my framework.
Yeah, like when does my namespace or when does my DLL become a framework?
Yeah,
right. Is the way I kind of interpreted his question.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Usually frameworks.
My answer would be when someone else calls it a framework.
Yeah, nice.
No, when you self-declare it one.
Yeah, I kind of like the explanation too. Like if you're building on it, it's a framework. If your project is heavily based upon this thing, but if you're building with it and you could replace it, you could do something else, and that's probably something different. But yeah, really, I just stay away from those words because it's confusing. But the words I use instead are just as bad. So I tend to do things like lib or core. Engine, which is really embarrassing.
No, but lib and core makes sense, right? Core.
No,
it's the same thing. Like it doesn't mean anything. It just means this isn't my website.
It's a bundle
project.
of stuff.
Well, lib sounds completely redundant. If it's going to be compiled into a DLL,
then it's a
library dynamic linked library.
Well, as soon as I start a website, I name it in Visual Studio, create a new solution, whatever, and then the project, and the next thing, the first thing I do is I create a lib for the logic. But
yeah, so
now you're going to start naming them all logic.
Well, what sucks is the first thing I create is usually the web project, so that's got the real name I wanted it. So if I wanted to make like roguelike game website, I would call the project roguelike game, and then the first thing I would add was like roguelike game
library.
Yeah, it's just gross, and that's where most of my code is. That's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I will say, I know I've sat there before, and I mean, I think you and I sat next to each other at one point, and we were going back and forth for like 20 minutes on what we should name just a class, and it's like, oh, come on, let's just put something down, right? Like, if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, whatever, we can change it later.
Just put something down there, I'll change it later, except I'm not going to change it later.
Right, that's really the key.
Well, that's the thing. Like, once you commit it, it's set.
But yeah, you're not alone, man.
People aren't going to change it. That's the sad, and that's why like, this is true of just like any kind of like, oh, let me just quick hack this in, right? Like, like why it's so important to take this proper times, because like it's so often that is going to become technical debt that will just hang around. So if you give something a really bad name, like in Joe's validator case, there's a good chance that it's just going to remain that name, even though that name really doesn't signify what it actually does.
Unless you're Angular, and then you just come out with a completely different.
Yeah. Oh, you guys familiar with the joke about the only two hard things in computer science?
No.
It's cache invalidation and naming things and off by one errors. But naming things is definitely in there.
Yeah. So again, you are absolutely not alone. It is hard to do this kind of stuff. And I mean, all of us have been doing it for a long time, and we still run into this.
You know what?
Every
No,
day.
that's not true. There's random baby name generators, and you just go to one of those, and that's the name of your new class. Because you think about it, every class that you're working on at the time that you're working on it, that's your new baby.
So Alouetta becomes one, right?
Okay.
All right. So hopefully,
that's why I got to instantiate a little, little Bobby Dean here.
You hungry?
That's Jimmy Dean.
That's Jimmy Dean.
I was thinking Bobby Table, little Bobby Tables, but
I don't know that reference.
XACD. We'll have a link in the show notes.
We got to show you the internet.
Apparently, yes.
Also, Matthew didn't really ask this, but I kind of went off researching in the wrong direction. But just wanted to kind of mention the Code Complete book, which we mentioned before, but it's got a whole chapter on naming things. And in iBooks, it's like 94 pages, so it's a lot of information.
Which on print, that's probably like 3.
Oh no, it's much more than that. It's a chapter. It's terrible. I think that's when I stopped reading this book, actually.
Oh, great.
So you guys should go read it.
That's a strong reference.
Yes, you should go read this book that I put down.
Right. This was my
Yes,
Waterloo.
Matthew, the question you asked made me stop reading the book.
But it's actually got like really great sections on like optimum name length and language specific naming conventions and different kinds of prefixes and all sorts of stuff. So if you really want to punish yourself, then that's a good way to do it.
All right, so optimum name length is like however many characters can fit on your screen.
I agree with that. And oh, that's a great way to bring this up. I got the 34-inch ultra wide.
Oh my god!
So that variable name is going to be insane.
Wow.
By the way, if you're a programmer and you love yourself, you should get this. It is, oh man, it is so good. It really
Is this going to be like one of your new Christmas tips? Or the
Oh, it'll be on the list. Yeah. I mean, it's better than I thought it could have been, right? And it's the LG 34. No, LG what UM.
Well, this
30,
one isn't like it's not 4K.
34
right?
UM 95-P. It's not 4K. It's 3560 by 2440. No, by 1440. So it's
Okay,
not.
so it's not quite.
Yeah, it's not 4K resolution, but it's. I forget what the.
It's just stupid big.
What is it? It's a 20 by 10. I can't. No, I can't. It can't be 20 by 10.
I thought it was like 34-1. I don't know.
I can't remember what the actual.
I can't remember
the ratio is, but man, it
if
is.
only there was a network of computers around the world that we could look up information.
Yeah, this thing called the interwebs. But yeah,
I mean, you never use it.
So apparently not. Hey man, I got things to do. So anyways, variable names. Honestly though, the 9 to 16 or whatever, what year did that
seriously if you make a variable name long enough that goes across your 34-inch monitor,
it's too long.
I will stab you.
I think
You heard it here on the show. He threatened me.
Yeah.
I will stab you with a blunt mouse. That's how much I'm going to mean it.
Yeah, I think that's too big for the symbol table. I don't think it's going to work.
Oh, that's awesome. No, but I mean, seriously, my thought on that is as long as it needs to be to make sense, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sentence, but I mean, it has to make sense, right? Like don't give me some, don't try and cram it down to 10 characters just because you have this arbitrary 10 character rule.
Yep. And yeah, the quote I got from the book basically says, an effective technique for coming up with a good name is to state in words what the variable represents, and often that statement is the best variable name.
Yeah, but I don't want a variable name that's a sentence.
Right, but it just means something like, rather than having a variable named count, call it
This variable is the input.
well, lines in file or something like that. So,
Yeah.
it's something that's usually a phrase. There might be some, some helper words in there.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, I'm still going to do count, but that's what the book recommends.
I thought you were supposed to just use like letters of the alphabet
Oh,
until you
no.
wrap around.
yeah, you do.
Especially in SQL, man. I cannot stand those acronym aliases.
Oh,
Oh
come
my
on,
God.
man. Look, we had this conversation the other day. I'm glad this came up. Who does not alias their tables? And does
Apparently
not-
this guy.
Yeah, he actually complained about it. He would rather type out a table name that's 80 characters long and do it 500 times in a row.
That's insane.
That's because that query is read 1,000 more times than it is written.
Man, look, if you
not by humans.
look, if you're aliasing your tables A, B, C, D, okay, I get it, right? That's a problem. But if your table name is people jobs, it should be PJ.
Well, what if your table
Oh.
name is alphabet? Then ABC might be a good name
That's
for
a great
it.
one. Hey, I'm good with that.
No cute acronyms.
Or maybe you just do A number 2 Z, right? Like I'm good with that. Make it represent it. But if
He
you are
just
not
threw up a little bit in his mouth.
Absolutely.
Hey, look, if you're not using table aliases, you need to step back from the keyboard and reevaluate what
I'm
you're doing.
totally with you on the table alias though.
Yeah, that
That's-
PC is great when you write it, but then 10 lines later when it's off screen, or not in Alan's case.
Well,
with
then
that
your
monitor.
query, like you're doing something wrong here.
Oh no, man! I've seen some big queries and they are just right.
I'm not saying that they weren't doing it wrong either.
But let me give you two things here. All right. One, if you have a self-joining table, you have to alias it. You have to. There's no way around it. And two, if you don't like it, just select the text in it in Management Studio, right click and put it in Design View, and then it'll give you everything you need right there.
Oh, and you can alias columns too, so you can join your PC on your PD, your .ffvv, whatever. And I'm not going to read it.
So is your problem the aliasing, or is it just really bad naming for the aliases?
Well, the aliases are usually something sensical, but I just hate the readability when I'm like in a big query and I don't like to look at the line when I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and then have to like go scroll up to see what GDV is, or little t ft8 or whatever it is.
Okay, I'm going to give you another tip of the week then, or of the episode, as it were, because we never do a weekly episode. I don't even know why I call it tip of the week. Anyways, you can split your view, right? Like you can drag down that little corner up in the right-hand corner and split your view, and then that way you can have all your froms showing in one spot so you don't have to scroll up and down. And then on your bottom portion, you can see your aliases, and life is dandy.
Or we could just not alias.
Oh, see, that's ridiculous.
you can actually do the same thing in Studio too.
Yes, you can. So
they're all
they're all based off the same underlying
So if you want
IDE.
to see the same file, if you want to see the different sections of the same file, you can do that.
Joe, I'm trying to help you, man.
He's shaking a little bit.
No.
He is. He's quivering.
What if you were to alias the table as Jennifer Garner?
No.
No, that kind of reference doesn't work for you.
I'm
But
going
I
to find
think he's
someone on the
shaking-
internet who agrees with
He's
me.
shaking because of the shingles. It's got nothing to do with the alias.
Right. Oh, don't make me shake these things at you.
I even made like a bad alias joke, and you still didn't like it. That's
Oh, is that
Oh,
the
I see.
show?
I don't
I've
know.
never watched it.
Yeah.
yeah. She. Okay, well, never mind.
Yeah. It fail.
Apparently, wow, tough crowd. All right,
Okay, so we beat that one up. Where are we at?
number 2,
Uh,
TDD. You guys with me?
oh, yeah. Here we go. Okay, go ahead. Kick it off.
No, I don't want to.
Okay,
Okay,
so-
so yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I read this. John Hansen just recently, well, I mean, of course I read it. John Hansen just recently wrote us, and he kind of took a little exception to what we had said about TDD in episode 20.
I don't think he liked my jokes.
Yeah, and so here's the deal. I'm sure we joked about it because we did talk about test-driven development in that episode quite a bit, and we said, nobody does it. And we say that because in a lot of situations, like if you were to try and sell it to anybody that we've ever done work for, they're like, oh no, we need code, we need it now, right? And his arguments, and they're very valid, and it's the whole reason TDD exists, is he said when you actually use TDD, you were forced to really understand the problem up front before you ever type in a line of code. And that is the whole reason it exists, is you build your test cases up front around the actual problem you're trying to solve before you ever get into the implementation. And there's a lot of value to it. And he goes on to say that there's been studies done that say when you approach it like this, there are usually less lines of code, and the code is actually better, and it takes less time to complete the
We
task.
actually referenced that in that episode. So, specifically in that episode, there we also talked about the book, The Art of Unit Testing, and one of the things that was talked about in that book was such a study where they took two teams, one that was doing traditional development where you would do your implementation first and then come back, and if there's time you'd unit test, and the other team that did test-driven development where they wrote their unit test first and then started writing the minimal amount to so at first all their tests failed, then they would write the minimum amount to make the test pass and then expand on it from there. And initially, if I remember the book correctly, the results were that in the first few weeks, the team that was doing the implementation was far exceeding the team doing the test-driven development pattern. But very quickly, within like maybe third week or less, I forget exact numbers, but very quickly, the test-driven development team they caught up, and then they started to pass the other team, and then where they really started to excel and really gain momentum past the other team was once the other team had finished what they thought was their initial implementation and they got into their testing phase, then they were discovering a lot more bugs, and some of those bugs were really costly to the overall architecture and things like that really ate up a lot of time. And the team doing the test-driven development, their testing cycle was a whole lot smaller because they found far fewer bugs because they had taken so much time up front to put the testing in place. So, I mean, some of this we did cover, but yeah, we have definitely made some jokes at the expense of TDD advocates.
Yeah, we even did in the last episode, right? Nobody does that, but
I'm sure we'll continue.
Yeah, I mean that's what we do.
It was a really good email. It was very thought provoking. He had some really good examples, kind of that he gave us, and so we really appreciate that email.
Yeah, and to go in before we wrap up with it, though, another thing that he did touch on that I liked, because we did pretty much say that you pretty much don't do TDD in brownfield. So existing applications, but he said that they actually, he does anyways, and he finds that it's useful because before they go try to solve a problem, they build their test cases just like they would if you were starting from scratch. You build those before you actually go in and try and solve the problem. And again, he said the big piece was truly understanding what the requirement was. So it's almost like what we talked about in episode 26, to where like you're given a problem in an interview or something, you need to fully understand what it is, and TDD actually facilitates that, right?
Well, I know I've done this, and I think we've actually talked about this before. I think maybe we talked about it in that episode 20. But I know where there have been times before, like for certain bugs in a system, especially in a system where we already have a lot of test cases in place, it's easier to do this where there'll be some bug come up, and I'll go ahead and write a test case specific to that ticket.
Right.
And there have been times, going back to our naming conventions, where for a right or wrong, I've actually put the ticket number in the name of the method just so for my own tracking purposes.
That's probably wrong. Yeah.
I don't remember if I committed it that way, but I know I do recall like I have done that before. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely created methods that tested, and that way that test was already failing.
Right. And then you're trying to turn it green.
And then I would try to like fix the bug to where it would pass.
But the problem with TDD and brownfield is a lot of times you can't really write a test because, if you haven't started out writing testable code, then it can be really hard to kind of just get in there and verify what you need to without touching database and session and file system.
Though. I mean, this is where like it gets such a bad name because if you're talking about like, it depends on like how deep into this application are you talking about you need to fix a bug or write some test case, because then yes, there could be a lot of dependencies that are interwoven in because it wasn't really thought about in a TDD modular kind of way where everything is broken apart nice and cleanly. But there are some times where even in these brownfield applications where smaller pieces are easy enough to go ahead and test, where you could do that. Like in the example that I gave, where you go ahead and create that test case for the bug.
Yep.
Right, where it's initially breaking.
When you can. It's not touching the database and the file system.
Yeah, like if it's in a code behind in a web form type thing that's nesting in database calls and 20 other things, right? It may be a little bit more difficult to do that because it was never broken apart in a way that you can actually write a test case without having to go through 30 steps to even get there, right? So I think that's what we meant when we were talking about this with brownfield last time, is we just made the assumption that it was just not architected or I shouldn't say architected because there's a lot of ambiguity. It wasn't designed in a way that actually makes that achievable, right?
Just interwoven dependencies, like what Joe mentioned, like if you have session scattered around throughout your code, right? Or, a database or file system references just scattered around throughout the code where it's not easy to be able to mock those in your method or class under test, then it can be more difficult.
Yeah, but I really do appreciate them writing in, because it is nice to know that there are companies out there that are actually allowing their teams to start off from a good starting point, right? That's excellent. I mean, it seems like most places I've worked, it's moving so fast that they don't want to slow down to take the time to do stuff like that. So yeah,
he definitely put a lot of thought into this, and I think we may have struck a chord
Yeah, I mean, we did, but and again, like, please do. Anybody that ever has any kind of comment like this, like, I loved getting it because the guy put a lot of thought into it, and obviously is very passionate about the way that they approach it. And his software is probably very bug free compared to a lot of other software out there. So, yeah, definitely. Like, if you ever have,
yeah, he did have some interesting statements in here though, where like he said that, you know, I view test-driven development really as requirement-first coding.
yeah,
You know?
Yeah, and
Like-
that's a really good way of putting it, and that makes a lot of sense.
What was the we went to some meetup that was a
Well,
business.
that narrows it down.
It was a business tool for writing like test driven.
SpecFlow. We talked about
SpecFlow.
that one time before.
Yeah, and that was really interesting because you can build those things up front, and that's kind of a nice way to let the business interact with your application to a certain degree.
SpecFlow solved a different problem though.
It's for business users.
And that was also there's also like what was it, Cucumber,
I don't remember.
and that it was Cucumber was the JavaScript version. SpecFlow, no, if I have that
Ruby.
Cucumber was for Ruby.
Yep.
That was for JavaScript. What was the JavaScript one? Pickle? No, no,
Just add vinegar.
that's real. I'm not making that up. I'm not making that up.
I have no
All right,
idea.
Somebody Google that.
Cucumber is JS. Let me see what it is. Ruby.
Then it was Pickle.
This is ridiculous. Really?
I must know.
There was a pickle framework.
So pickle for Ruby?
How do you know when it's a framework?
I don't know what this is about to pull up. This kind of scares me. Pickle
There was-
for Ruby.
Whatever. One of you guys can find it. But
I have no
Our
idea.
spec is Ruby. There's also Cucumber, though, so I don't know.
There's pickle my cucumber, Ruby Flare. I have no idea. All right, so now we're just rambling. All right.
yeah. whatever.
Anyways, yeah. So it is definitely
Pickle is a JavaScript implementation of the Python pickle format.
Oh yeah, that
It
does nothing
supports
for me.
pickles containing cross-language subsets of the primitive types.
All right.
Awesome. All right, so moving on.
I knew it was a real framework.
Thank you for the email.
See, that's the problem. There's so many JavaScript frameworks out there, and they got to come up with weird names that don't describe them.
Well, they have to.
They
Follow,
need to listen to this
Well, hold
naming
up.
convention.
They have to follow Java. I mean, for every framework that Java does, we need at least one more for JavaScript, right? So
I don't know if they're related, but my point though is valid that their names are horrible.
all right, so now we're coming back around to design pattern versus algorithm.
Oh, we're onto that.
Yes.
So
Is a design pattern an algorithm?
yeah, there was some awesome feedback we got on this question, and it came from a variety of sources too, Twitter or email. It seems the consensus was that no, they're not the same.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep, and we got some really cool examples from people. Like we mentioned the Rue one earlier, kind of explaining how they understood the difference, and that was really good for helping us kind of
but
wrap our head around it.
But here was so I wanted to add a little bit to this though, because if you were to go and do a Google search for just simply go into Google, is a design pattern an algorithm, right? The top two results are going to be from Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange, same thing. Both on this topic. What's the difference between an algorithm and a design pattern? Or the other one is, what's the difference between a design pattern and an algorithm? So just flip-flopped. But those are the top two Google results. And I found it like even, based off of some of the feedback that, the listeners were giving back, even going back and looking at like formal definitions of these things, it's so vague.
Yeah, it's
right. Like, let me just say, read this off from Wikipedia, right? So a design pattern in architecture and computer science is a formal way of documenting a solution to a design problem in a particular field of expertise. Right. All right. Now,
Huh?
yeah.
Oh, we're back.
Now here's algorithm. In mathematics and computer science, an algorithm is a self-contained, step-by-step set of operations to be performed.
Ooh, self-contained. That might have done it right there.
Well, it was more. What was really more as I was trying to dig into this. What I was really hoping to find was like something a little more definitive, and I never really did.
Looking for a smoking gun.
Yeah, but I think it was more the step-by-step part of the algorithm definition, and the design pattern one was more a design problem in a particular field of expertise. Like, as taking aside the examples of like if you were to go and look at design pattern information on like the Singleton was the example we gave, right? Where there's plenty of implementation, there's plenty of like, here's the steps that you need to do, right? Then aside from that one, the other ones were like, okay, this makes a little bit more sense where they, where you could make the strong argument that these are not the same, right? But my favorite answer that I did find that was on Stack Overflow was from or the Stack Exchange link that was actually the accepted answer, although not by many, and I don't necessarily agree with this answer, but I just thought it was kind of humorous, was that the guy says, a binary search is a design pattern. It's a problem that pops up all the time, and the same pattern, a binary search, solves it. There's no difference between design patterns and algorithms from a mathematical level. Now, if you're talking to another human, you should probably not say this because they are not capable of reducing ideas to their base components. Just like you shouldn't tell a math guy that all math is just basic addition, even though it's true. I was surprised that this was the accepted answer.
Well,
but
people like people who
but it was
interesting.
Accepted by the asker.
Okay, fine. But it actually had some votes on it too, though, or at least an extra vote.
Interesting. So we still don't know.
Well, no, I mean, the
based
consensus,
off what he said,
definitely the consensus is that they're not.
They're not, right?
But like I said, like you go back and dear listener, do your own reading on this. You'll see, like, the definitions of both are so vague, and you could really make an argument in either direction if you wanted to. And the only reason why that guy's answer that I read off that I thought was kind of interesting was the fact that if you did break it down to where he mentioned it being from a mathematical level, and how legally there have been arguments that everything that we as developers do is just math formulas, so who cares, right? You've heard those arguments before when it comes to like the patentability, for example, of certain algorithms or code or whatever, right? That when he mentioned that, I was like, okay, now it definitely kind of muddies it a little bit more. But I still I agree, they're not.
Yeah, and we really appreciate the feedback, and we got some really good conversations out of it. So thank you.
Yep. All right, so our next one came from probably Outlaw's favorite person on the planet, Jeremy Singleton. So he asked a question about...
I think that name's a lie. I don't think that's his real name.
It's pretty awesome.
He's just buttering you up?
Yeah. No, his real name is Jeremy Factory.
So he had a question about like the various different types of frameworks, such as MVC versus Mvvm. What's the difference? What? Right? So, and it is kind of vague because you look at certain things and they're just labeled that way, and so it's easy to just take them at face value, right? Like you have the MVC framework in .NET, and then you have Mvvm for, it was Silverlight, XAML, that kind of stuff. So there's tons of things. So at any rate, we dug into this a little bit, and I believe, Joe, did you put together these notes on it?
Yeah, I did. And actually, this question reminds me a little bit of the one we were talking about just a second ago with the algorithms versus design patterns, where we can define either one, but when you try to compare them, that things get a little weird. And so we thought we'd start just kind of by saying what model view controller is. And basically, we found a real simple version of this where we say the M in MVC stands for model, which is what your item is.
Data. V is for view, which is what that data looks like. True UI.
And C for controller is what it does.
Yep.
But that's really simple. So if we're talking about like, say a website, and you go to the home page, there might be a controller for the home page. I'm not really sure what this looks like, but I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of models and at least one controller involved in the making of this thing.
Yeah, so usually your controller is shaping the data or providing the data to your view, right? So you have in an MVC application, your model's your data, your views, let's say it's a web page, right? Then that's going to be your HTML and whatever templates have been defined over there. And then your controller is what's taking that data and providing it to the view.
And it also does things like if you click add to cart, then your controller should be handling that action, right? It's
the logic.
Yeah, it's what your page is doing.
Yep. And then so when you get into the MVVM, and there's even MVCVM, I mean, there's a ton of variations on these things, but really what it boils down to is MVVM was created by Microsoft, essentially based off Martin Fowler's one of his designs, but essentially it's binding. So your view model is kind of like a bridge for the data to go from, and because there's no controller there, it's kind of hard to say it, but your view model is what takes your data from the model and then provides it to the view itself. So it's kind of just like a transport layer. It's not supposed to have any knowledge of anything going on. And I think the reason why they did it, and it really all boiled down to this, it was data binding. So essentially you could have your UI guys working on the view. You could have your programmers working on the logic part of it. And then this view model would just be what says, hey, take the data from these guys that programmed it and give it to the view and let it use it.
Yeah, and what I think is important to mention here is that the M and the V are kind of the same. But what is kind of different, or at least implied different here, is when you're dealing with an MVVM situation, you're often dealing with more than one model. And that view model takes those different models and it kind of brings those together into a way that the view can deal with. So it takes, the products, it takes the account information, it takes the, search data, and it kind of brings those together in such a way that the view can make sense of it. And so the view knows how to get its products, and it knows how to get your name for the, hello, Joe kind of stuff. And so the VM really simplifies what the presentation layer has to know about.
Right. Basically what it boils down to is your view should not be doing any kind of logical type stuff. The data that is coming across should just basically be spit out onto the screen, whether it's on a web thing or on your desktop app, something like that. And I'll take it to Angular for those who are used to that kind of thing. Like they have this whole, it's an MVVM type thing, or it's actually kind of MVCVM because they do have these notions of controllers. But essentially, your controller should be what's changing things. It's doing the logical pieces of the code. Then that gets bound to your view. Anything that you change in the view automatically gets transferred back to the model and vice versa. So it's a two-way data binding, at least in 1.3. Apparently they're doing away with that in 2.0. But it has a lot to do with the binding and not having you should have all your logic in the controller, and then your view should just be able to, it knows the shape of the data that's supposed to come over, and it should just be able to use it. That's it.
Yep. And MVVM doesn't mean that there is no controller. There's still something that needs to kind of manage these behaviors and events. It's just that there's this VM there. And there's actually a really good example, explanation someone gave on Stack Overflow. True Blue Aussie will have a link to this. But they say that the view model holds a certain shape of data and commands, and they don't know, or the view doesn't know where the data comes from, and it doesn't really care how that gets saved or kind of reflected back to the persistence layer. But the view is able to communicate with this view model, and that keeps that view really dumb and focused on it's just its job of looking good.
Yep, and I will also say with this, MVVM is typically done all at your view layer, which is kind of odd, right? So if you have an MVC, so in .NET, if you're talking about your web MVC, that's usually talking about server-side technologies. So your models, like your database storage and all that kind of stuff, your view is your HTML page, and then your controller is the actions, like your button click.
So we're going to put this all in. We're going to put MVVM inside of my MVC.
Yes. So actually, the MVVM actually replaces your V typically. So that's generally speaking what you have. So I mean, if you're really going to break it down, it'd be MVVM C, right? And that's really what you're getting. Usually when you see these frameworks, that is your UI level.
Yeah, the V and the VM are very tightly coupled. You're not frequently going to see those used apart, but you are going to see
That's a
models.
bold statement, though.
So what?
That's a bold statement, though.
Pretty accurate. I mean, because that's what it usually boils down to.
I like your confidence, sir.
You like that? All right, I'm about to get all kinds of flame mail on this one. It's going to be great.
Well, I do think of the view model as being closer to view than model. At least that's how I kind of think of it. You know, it's just kind of a presentation layer that view knows how to interact
View model
with.
closer to view than model?
Yeah.
Yes.
You wouldn't consider it closer to controller than either?
Not really, because I think of the view model as data only. So this is, you know, when I change my name on the account page, then it knows how to, you know, reflect that change back to
It's
the
your
model.
glue.
And the model is in charge of writing it to a database or log or, you know, whatever else.
Yeah.
I only pose that just because, like, in this very Stack Overflow article that you're pointing out, like, there was one of the high rated ones was where the guy was saying that the view model replaced the controller.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, really.
I don't either. I've never seen it happen that way.
I think in a simple example, it can be like if I'm making like a simple like account page where I kind of, you know, sign up and I say save, then I can get how that VM replaced the controller there, because the VM should know how to kind of write itself back to those various models. And that makes sense to me that you wouldn't need a controller. But I don't see a lot of behaviors happening in that view model. I don't want to see button click events in a view model. And I think you still need those things.
Right.
Okay. I'll give you that one. I agree with you there.
That's my opinion.
But yeah, so, I mean...
I did want to say that this is sometimes also referred to as the model view binder.
Yeah, we saw that. Yes.
So depending on your language.
They said non-Microsoft usually refers to it that way, right?
Well, Knockout JS, for example, it's model view binder there.
It's kind of interesting. I think because we program in a Microsoft realm.
Oh my God, this is a Microsoft show?
But it's JavaScript, isn't it? I mean, usually when I hear like Angular or a lot of these other ones, Ember, they're usually referred to as Mvvm. I haven't actually heard that other one ever referred to in the wild.
The model view binder?
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. It like even when I'd heard
just
Knockout.
to be complete.
Yeah, nice try, guys. It's MVVM.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I've always heard it as MVVM. But
yep. Oh, I had one example I wanted to give. Maybe I should have done earlier, but I did want to say that you can have MVVM without binding, you know, strictly speaking. And I wanted to give an example where I had this a project. It was a website, and it had like one of these 17-step wizards where you kind of, you know, you enter your first name. The next page has your payment details. The next one has, you know, your job history, whatever. And what was kind of interesting about that is the database structure was very flat. Like there was one big table that had a ton of rows. Everything was one-to-one. And this wizard would fill in different parts of this table based on what step you were on. And in this case, you know, there was really only one model. And I had a bunch of different view models, though, that lined up with each step of the wizard. And so the view model was in charge of, you know, knowing how to set those fields and unset if you know, chose different actions. But the views didn't know anything about how this was, you know, only one model in the background. So I thought it was kind of an interesting use case of a MVVM pattern.
Say that 10 times fast.
I can't without binding.
yeah, that is. Yeah, so hopefully that helps a little bit. I mean, before MVC got popular, I mean, what was it? Just willy-nilly style. You just do whatever you wanted.
PHP, baby.
Well, I mean, that really the whole reason these patterns exist is to separate concerns. We've talked about it a number of times, but a lot of times it's separation of concerns so that there's code maintainability, but there's also testability, right? Like if you have your model and your controller and everything nested in one, like we talked about earlier, it's really hard to put together tests.
View code in general is hard to test.
Yeah, it is. But the whole purpose of something like MVVM is you should never have to test your view because it doesn't matter. That's really the whole idea behind it, is because it's kind of a dummy container that just spits stuff out. It shouldn't matter that much. Really what you care about is what happens when data is moving back and forth. So, and I know that's a really general thing. Of course you want to test your UI, but as far as writing like unit tests and that kind of stuff, you know, this allows you to do that.
Oh, yeah, and did want to mention, if you guys have a better explanation, then we would love to hear it. So tweet us or email or something, and we'll throw it out there.
Yep, absolutely. We're not afraid to address our past mistakes.
Indiscretions.
Indiscretions, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to actually hear some cool examples of where others are using MVVM.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody out there has like a one sentence example that just sums it all up perfectly. Maybe.
They would have
Maybe.
the key to the internet.
Yes, they would. All right, so we also Sam, the guy who found Outlaw's hidden lair again, or not so hidden lair, he did write in and said something about, hey, some of the things that I'd like to hear more about would be like learning things that are hard to learn at your job, Agile, Scrum, making enterprise architecture choices, and then potentially we might even have a future episode because he asked about mocking libraries, and he also asked about unit testing, which is episode 20. So if he hasn't heard it yet, please do go back and listen to that one, and then ask us any questions that we might have glossed over. But so
it's kind of hard to teach yourself Agile by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So here was my take on the Agile thing, and Swansea Con is actually a good way to do something like that. It's a whole conference dedicated to learn for Agile people, or so the way that I look at something like this is if it's not in your current job and it's something that you are passionate about and you want to go learn, going to a conference or maybe even a class is an excellent way to get filled in on this kind of stuff. Meetups are awesome.
There's probably an Agile meetup near you.
Yeah, more than likely there is because it's incredibly popular now. So that's,
According to LinkedIn, I'm like an agile master.
Yeah.
Did you see that I endorsed you for it
Oh
the
my
other day just
God.
for fun?
I'm going to do it right now, actually.
Jeez.
So that's definitely one way, especially with something like that, because really that's more of a methodology of doing things, right? So that's a great way to learn that. Another way, dude, Pluralsight actually has videos on this kind of stuff. Also, you can pick up books on Agile and Scrum. Granted, you can't put it into practice because, maybe your company doesn't want to, but if you learn it enough, potentially you can get it in there. And then there's always this. Your company doesn't want to do it, you just go to another one. So,
Wow.
so
That's harsh.
Yeah, that's a little rough. But I mean, I'm not telling you to leave your job. But
Where is he?
now this one I know we're all somewhat passionate about, making architecture choices. So again, that's kind of vague. But let's talk about just picking your tech stack for one.
Oh, we already did this though.
Did
That
we?
was the Hot Stacks episode.
Well, that was just me rambling on about not being able to make up my
No, but
mind.
I mean, we talked about that. We went into that in detail about like picking which technology stack.
Well, let's talk about it within a company as opposed to just a side project, which is what I was talking about initially.
But I think our answers there applied to either. I mean, basically, we talked about different ways of, prototyping it, and there's something to be said about getting to market fast.
Yep.
Right? Whether that's, a market for yourself or for your company. So if you wanted to prototype it in something that you know well, then there's no harm in that. But if unless you just really want to take the time to learn some other framework, or there's something else out there that you've heard a lot of great things about and you really want to take the time to invest in learning that, then sure. But, that because you're going to be less knowledgeable about that, you might be setting yourself up.
All right, so let's talk about it from the perspective of you have a team of 20 people and you introduce a new stack. And now you've got, let's say that in a situation you already had 3 tech stacks and you only had a couple people that were dedicated to each, and now you introduce a new one. Would you, I mean, they can set you
Which
up
one costs the least?
Yeah, I would say think long and hard before you do that, because there's going to be some attrition.
It's really, yeah, it's,
The answer is always going to be like which one costs the least.
but is that immediate cost or is that future? Because the thing is,
Your boss and the bean counters won't care.
that's true.
Now, if
But-
you're used to COBOL, maybe it's time to upgrade, but there has to be some serious business reasons for changing,
Yeah,
I would think.
I mean, that's one of the key things that I want to take away from just saying this right here is just because something's free, like let's say MySQL, right? Maybe they don't want to do it for reasons that, I don't know what they might have, but, they have licenses for SQL Server. They're spending a ton of money on it. They want to stay with that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so
I guess like this question could be taken in a couple of different ways. Like, enterprise architecture choices. Is it your enterprise and these are your people?
Right.
Or is this a customer and it's their enterprise that
I'm
you're
so
concerned about?
lost right now.
But regardless, the cost is definitely going to be a factor when you start talking about enterprise. When you start talking about the large companies like that, because it's going to matter. You know what I was talking about with quality. Yeah.
We have
There's some water running. You're probably not going to hear it, but there's
So,
some water
actually,
running.
it's very faint when it comes out. So, anyways, yeah.
So unfortunately, you might want to use the new hotness, like you'd mentioned. The next version of Angular.
Yep.
Well, that's going to be more difficult to find those resources. Those resources that are good are going to be more expensive,
And it could change.
Documentation is going to be harder to come by for it because it's still so new. Therefore, your development cycle is going to be longer. I mean, those are all serious costs that you're going to have to weigh in. And whether it's your company or your client's company that you have to think about. Plus, you have to think about, like you mentioned, and I think these are all things that we addressed in that episode. I don't remember that it was
called Hot Stacks. I don't remember. I could find it.
But do you already have licenses for Oracle? Well, then if you already have a site license for Oracle, then switching over to SQL Server, there's going to have to be a good reason for it. Or maybe you already have a lot of in-house expertise on SQL Server. Therefore, moving to DB2 is, you're going to have to, there's training and tooling that's going to have to happen there. So,
Yeah, that was episode
unfortunately,
17.
money is going to be, a big part of that decision when it comes to.
But I also think you need to look at your team. If you've got a bunch of experts in one technology and you're wanting to go another direction because it is the new hotness or because it's something you're interested in, you have to take that into consideration when something goes wrong. Who's going to be able to work on it, right? And I will say though, there is something to be said too. And I joked about leaving your job, but I mean honestly, if I was stuck working on a VB6 application today, I would be looking for something else.
Well, that's different though. That's an outdated technology though. Like when Joe brought up the COBOL example. But let's bring up another example. Let's say if you are in a shop, let's say you're in a C# shop, and you have a strong passion to write Go, right? In that case, then maybe it would be advantageous to go ahead and start shopping around if that's something that you truly wanted to pursue. But if you were to create some new app and you wrote it in Go and you're the only one that knows it and you're the only one that can support it, then as that company becomes dependent on it, that's going to become their technical debt.
Yep.
That you have to consider when you choose that.
And I will say this too, and this is probably, I don't know, maybe going a little bit too long on it, but one other thing is consider how easy it is to find resources out there.
I actually hate my answers though, because it just makes it sound like, just stay with the norm.
Yeah, and that's always a tough thing, right?
That's often the answer.
It really is often the answer, and that's why there are still companies working in VB6, but it's one of those things too, though. Anytime that I'm working on a project,
the VB6 I can't take. I can't accept that argument. And here's the reason why. I can't accept that argument, because that is a case of a company not upgrading as things progress. Okay, so to make an analogy to that argument would be like saying a company who's still on C# or .NET 2.0, right? That would be the equivalent of to your V#6. Okay,
example. I'll give you a different one.
But using
Cold
a
Fusion.
different architecture or different framework, things like that. Hey, we're on, I can't even. I'm trying to think of an old JavaScript library, but and you want to move to a
Prototype.js.
Okay, and you want to move to Angular 2, or you want to move to Knockout, or Ember, whatever it is that whatever your new hotness is that you think this is going to solve all of our problems. I've done some research in it, but that's different because it's not necessarily just an upgrade. Whereas your VB6 example is the company didn't take the time at the times that they should have to upgrade their application as changes were happening to Visual Basic. And so now going from VB6 to .NET 4.5 or 5.0 is coming. Now it's going to become a bigger effort than it should have been had they maintained it all along.
So I'll say I used to do Cold Fusion programming, and a lot of those companies that had it had, hundreds of thousands of lines of code written in that. And so they never wanted to change away from it, right? It's like trying to steer the Titanic away from that. It just wasn't going to happen. And so they end up staying with it. And so if you find yourself in a position to where you can't work on new architecture because you're stuck on some old stuff, then maybe you need to look at what you want to do.
Well, I agree with that. If you're in a company that's just dead set in their old ways and they don't want to move with technology, then that might not be the place for you.
And you have to be careful because you can easily, if this ends up being 2 or 3 years down the road, you're stuck in an old technology. You haven't touched any new stuff, and it's going to be hard for you to shift gears, and nobody else is using it.
You're basically like putting yourself out of market.
Yeah, you are, and that's what I'm saying.
If you stay on that old technology, like those years, if you were doing Visual Basic 6 development right now, and I'm sorry that we're harping on Visual Basic 6, but that does nothing for your resume right now.
Right, and that's the thing too. Like, let's say this company has a layoff, and you are no longer there. What are you going to do now? So hopefully you've been at home programming on your own, trying to figure stuff out. I mean, it's just a really tough thing. So I wanted to say that. But then the other thing also, I've led projects where you're looking at what technology stack to use at the time. And again, it's different than when you're just doing something for yourself. You can pick up whatever you want, right? Because you're just trying to do it for fun or whatever the case may be. If you're in a company, you need to look at what kind of resources available. Can I find Angular programmers? Can I find .NET programmers? Can I find COBOL programmers, right? You need to, and like Ember. Ember is one of the hot new JavaScript frameworks, and a lot of companies use it, especially startup companies, but companies that are looking to make big teams go quickly, it's hard to find those resources.
It's scary to be on Ember 10 years from now when there's, Radiant and Emerald and whatever else is
React.
out at the time, You don't want to still be supporting by that, but you have to be thinking about that sort of thing when you make decisions. Like Scott Hanselman actually had a really nice quote about basically asking yourself, have I had 10 years of experience or have I had 1 year of experience 10 times?
Interesting. Yeah. So
I was thinking about this the other day, not necessarily the architecture question, but just like as a software developer in general, and making sure that you stay current and marketable. It's kind of like, with doctors or anyone in the medical field, they have to stay current, take continuing education classes, with latest findings and whatnot as it relates to medicine. And in a lot of ways, software development is similar in that if you want to stay current, you have to find a way and get into a good pattern of continuing to learn new technologies as they come out.
And that can be...
I know that's off topic of that question, but...
No, but it's a very good point. And it can be either you move to jobs where they have that, to where there's constant growth in it, right? Where they're changing technologies and they're staying up with the times. Or it can be you're just spending your nights, going through and watching Pluralsight videos or writing sample code. So it's really up to you, but it is something that...
Yeah, if you're still programming in one of these older languages, you're doing yourself no favors.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous situation to be in.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
speaking of older technologies, I just endorsed Michael for Subversion.
Awesome. Hey, I actually think I did the other day too.
Oh my God.
Me and 3 others have.
I'm going to unendorse him for all the new stuff just for fun.
Oh, come on now. That's not nice.
Okay, I will do that.
Right. And while we're on top, you guys should go link this in, and we'll endorse you.
Yeah, check us out on LinkedIn. Hey, so
scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Yeah, www.codingblocks.net/about, and you'll find all our profiles and LinkedIn links and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, Jesus.
Anyways, all right. So on to the resources we like this week. So Joe, kick us off.
I wanted to mention Code Complete. That's the book we were
that you put down.
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry, man. That is the book that I stopped reading at when talking about naming things. But it is a really good book, actually. And
thanks,
also, there's the book Clean Code, which also talked a lot about naming. And so that's I didn't actually mention it when we talked about it, but it's also a really good book for that sort of thing.
All right, and this isn't actually our resource, but Mike Barlow wrote us quite a while back, and I dug up his email, and he had a fantastic thing going back to one of the episodes where we kind of went on about Pluralsight versus Lynda versus books, whatever. And he had a resource I didn't even know existed that's kind of cool because we had talked about, it's frustrating trying to pick up a book, get it home, and then find out that it's not what you wanted. It's not that good. There is a safaribooksonline.com, and safaribooksonline.com, and they have a whole library of books that you can check out, kind of like a Pluralsight or something. You just go look at it. And it's $39 a month, so it's kind of up there, a little bit costlier than the Pluralsight lower end thing. But, they have a whole slew of books from different publishers.
You're talking about this like you've never heard about Safari Books Online, though.
I haven't. I just said I'd never heard of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I missed that part when you said that.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
So then, really? You've never heard of this?
Ever.
Wow.
Yeah. So, if you haven't heard of it, like me, because I've never been on the internet, then you should go check.
another example.
Yet another example of things I have not seen on the interwebs. But, I thought that was pretty cool. So you can basically, spend $39 a month or $400 a year, and you basically have access to a whole slew of technical books, which is pretty awesome. So,
yeah, and what man, we should find that email, because like the one thing that I didn't realize, that because I have heard about this before, but the one thing that he called out in that I wasn't aware of was that I always assumed that it was locked down to just the O'Reilly books, but he actually referenced in his
A-Press, O'Reilly, Pax, Sam's, Manning, Addison, Wesley.
Yeah, and Manning especially is one where like I really like a lot of the Manning publications.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, these are major publishers. It's not just one.
Hate the covers though.
Yeah,
the Manning covers are terrible. O'Reilly covers are awesome.
I just wish you could get them. I wish you didn't have to buy the physical version to get the soft copy.
Oh, and also a thing he mentioned that I didn't realize either is they have videos. So like he said he would do a search and then sort on the published date so that he could get the freshest one. And like AngularJS and the title of a book, there were 30 books and 10 videos. ASP.NET MVC, 31 books, 3 videos, JavaScript, 220.
It sounded like they had like completely expanded on this thing since they originally launched it. So, while I had heard of it, if you like me recalled this thing when it originally started out as an O'Reilly thing, know now that they've expanded on the offering. So, it might be something of interest to you.
Yep. So thank you, Mike, for sending that tip in. That's excellent.
All right. So let's get into the tip of the week.
Is this really the week or the tip of the episode?
Whatever.
I have a tip every week. It's just you guys don't get to hear it.
All right. So mine.
Oh, but you know where you could is if you signed up for our newsletter.
That's weekly.
That's the tip of the year.
Now we may tweet weekly.
Yeah, we do that.
So for my tip of the week, the question is, where is Mike's tip of the week? And I say that because my tip of the week, and Alan will attest to this, is to use a wear clause.
Oh,
burn.
Man, so all your SQL, if you're going to do an update statement, you should be careful and use a where clause.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Write the where clause first.
I don't know what he's talking about.
I always write like update table set, and then I don't say anything else, and then I say where, and then that way it's already a syntactic error. It won't, so that I'm safe that it won't run.
So frustrating, man. It's such a newbie mistake, man.
But since you just tweeted that out, I was like, oh, that's
so
frustrating.
That's comical. Where's my tip? That's
what your tip could have been.
I was wondering, when I put that in the show notes, I was just waiting on one of you to like catch on to what I was going to say.
Yeah, I got it now. I'm not happy.
You know what might help you, Alan, is something like T-SQL-T, which is a unit test framework for SQL.
I'm not unit testing my SQL. My SQL's right. It just didn't have a where clause. There was no error when I ran that. It just had a higher row count than I
for some definitions of correct. All right.
But you guys all know that moment where you run it, you're like,
wait, why is it still running?
Why didn't it say 1?
Where's the undo?
Yeah, and there's like
Control
10 vendors that will sell you some sort of unit testing solution for SQL, and none of them will show you the syntax, so you know what that means.
Man, and you know what hurt so bad was his previous tip of the week was, if you put that begin transaction right before the update, then you can run both of them, and if it's not the right row count, then you can just roll it back. I was like, man, I'm so aggravated. Anyways, all right, Joe, what's yours?
So that's an awesome tip of the week that Alan can take home with him.
Yeah, whatever.
I think Alan should go first because mine's sad.
Yours is sad.
Yep.
All right then. So I will go first, or I will go second. This one's actually kind of cool. I found this on a LinkedIn thread that people were arguing about things, which is what they do up there. If you want to write you want to create an application, but you basically don't have an API or a back end, there's a site called apiary.io where you can build these server-side APIs without actually writing any code. And if you are just a person doing this, it's free. You can set it up, and you can go create these server backends, and it gives you all kinds of stuff. You have HTTP like proxies that you can look at how data's coming in and what should be going out and all this kind of stuff. So it's rather interesting. I'd never heard of it, and I haven't actually played with it much yet, other than just reading through what it does. But you can basically mock out and build these APIs that are functional and test your applications against it without actually writing any code. So you can focus on creating these APIs that you want, and then after you finally whittle everything down to what you think it should be, then you start actually coding it. So pretty cool.
Very nice. All right, now for my my bummer tip. So a couple of weeks, maybe even months ago at Atlanta B-Sides, I saw a really good talk, which is titled basically "When You're Online, No One Knows You're Dead." And it basically had to do with a really tech savvy person who died, and their surviving spouse had to kind of figure out how to manage the leftovers of their kind of digital life. So it was things like trying to figure out how to access family pics that were on his computer,
update their Facebook status.
And even how to get Facebook and Gmail and Outlook and everyone to kind of, turn over the rights to those accounts to kind of shut some of the stuff down. Because you think about, banking statements, services, hosting. This person had a side business. A lot of the bills for the family were, basically in digital only form. And so they had to kind of try to crack into those emails. And it was really tough, and it was a really good talk. And even just the home network, how to kind of figure that out was all, really tough, and where the backups were, et cetera. And so,
what was their answer to LastPass?
They had a lot of answers. It was very complicated. And one of the actually things that I think it was called the Iron Key. It's basically something that you can do. It's like it's almost like a USB drive that has kind of ways into and information about all your various different services, and something that you can kind of put in a safe, once a month or something like that. And when you die, it can get turned over to someone, and they can kind of take over that stuff.
That is kind of sad. Thanks.
Yeah, but it was a really good talk, and so it's actually by one of the guys from the Defense and Security
There's something you need
podcast.
to tell us?
Yeah, just in case.
Is this why you're moving?
But you know what? That is kind of valid, because my wife has actually said to me before, she's like, "Oh my God, like if you weren't here, I wouldn't know how to do any of this stuff. I wouldn't know how to get my Wi-Fi working. I wouldn't know." Like,
yeah,
she literally kind of freaks out on occasion about it.
You teaching her how to set up a Wi-Fi is one thing, but giving her the credentials, though.
Yeah.
And this guy,
that's why I asked, like, is LastPass the answer?
It's part of mine
to a lot of these, because you could just family share that stuff.
But you have to admit, like, as techies, we don't, and I've said this before, and we've come across this before, where, like, this happened with the Git logging credentials, right? You were like, "Hey man, I found this great thing to where you don't have to type in your Git credentials every time you do something." I was like, "Oh yeah, I already did that." Right? You don't think about it, because this is just what we do. You find a problem, you get past it and you move on, right? We don't think about how difficult some of this stuff is.
So I need a wiki for my life, is what you're saying.
That's actually what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, this guy had some kind of helpful tips for how to kind of manage that sort of thing. But in particular, this guy, he was kind of a security guy, so his hard drives were all encrypted, full disk encryption. Things like network passwords or just computer passwords for his devices weren't in things like LastPass. And so there were things that were difficult to get into, including a lot of, he's a family photographer. So there are all sorts of pictures and stuff that are kind of locked away on disk, and there's not a great way of getting to that data. So just things to think about.
Yeah. So excellent tip. Real sad. Thanks.
And even phone numbers and stuff, like, it was a car accident, and so the devices were lost, and so it was really hard to even.
I think you've already brought the
get a
tone
hold
down
of people.
enough on this show.
Yeah,
like,
you really.
way to take all of the fun out.
Yeah, see you guys next week.
Wait, they're not just IP addresses now?
Wait, what?
They're still phone numbers?
Some
right.
areas of the country.
Okay, so.
All right, so we hope you've enjoyed the show. We've talked about naming conventions and TDD and MVC versus Mvvm, and stumbled on how to say that 10 times fast. And let us know what you think about it for in regards to some shorter episodes. We'd like to get some feedback on that.
Which was www.codingblocks.com or I did it. www.codingblocks.net. That's your fault. .net/poll, POLL.
All right, so subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app. And be sure to leave us a review on those platforms as well. Like we've said before, we greatly appreciate that. It goes a long way to help us and to help new listeners find us. So we really appreciate it.
Yep, and contact us with any question or topic. As you can tell with this episode, we really do like to get them, and we take them to heart. Leave your name and preferred method of shout-out if you want one, website, Twitter, whatever, and we'll mention you on the podcast.
And visit us at codingblocks.net, where you can find show notes, examples, discussion, and more.
And
Send us your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net. It's like 10 o'clock at night, guys. I don't know. I'm shutting down.
Well, one of these days we'll actually get good at this.
We've only done it 27 times.
Yeah.
28.
Definitely follow us on Twitter at Coding Blocks. Like, we've gotten some great...
Huh? There was the one episode we threw away, the secret episode that nobody knows about.
We did. I probably have.
We got they're listening.
Yes, it was terrible. Anyways, yeah, follow us on Coding Blocks. Follow us somewhere. Go to Twitter at Coding Blocks. We've actually had some great. It's hard to call a thing on Twitter discussion, isn't it?
That's what it is. That's the discussion.
Is it? It's hard to do a discussion in 140.
That's why it says view discussion,
right?
Or view conversation.
Okay, yeah. So
it's a conversation.
We've had some great back and forth on Twitter. So definitely come join us over there. We enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. So. That's it. Episode 27 is a wrap.
Boom.
Is my nose whistling or is that your nose? Is that your nose?
What? Am I doing?
It's probably me.
Do I have boogers?
That's why I wanted the napkin thing. So I could
Just got to eat them. You really don't like toilet paper?
You don't blow your nose with toilet paper?
That's my preferred. It's right there.
But then I need a lot of it. Whereas one napkin has the strength to be able to last. It's got strength.
No, we buy the good toilet paper, man. I need it.
Yeah, the 2-ply. Yeah,
yeah.
2-ply doesn't flake off. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man.
What is this Google?
Wait, which one do you use? Which one?
I don't know, Charmin something.
Ultra soft. I get the ultra strong.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yes.
Yeah, man. No toilet paper left behind.
I need ultra sensitive.
You got the aloe going on.
I need it, man. We're not recording. I hope.
I would love to have a bidet.
Oh my god!
I have a bidet.
Yeah,
they're fantastic.
Oh man,
you have a bidet in your house?
Dude, I bought one at Costco. Of course, I had it at Costco. It's like $200. The only thing that sucked is I had to run an electrical outlet with a GFCI over by the toilet to make it work, because this is the kind that you hit a button and it's like zzz, zzz. It's fantastic.
Oh man, I thought that was a water fountain. Sorry, little late.
No, dude, they are great, but they do not eliminate the need for toilet paper.
Yeah,
I've heard Leo say that it does.
This is the most disturbing conversation because we're talking about how he wipes.
Dude, Leo's gone off on it. He's got a $4,000 toilet.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to do it with water in your hand at the same time, and then you wash your hand good.
What?
Yeah, you can't just do water. You can't just do water. When you take a shower, you don't just do water. You know what I'm saying?
You don't do same time.
I don't want to know where you guys put your hands.
No, man, they go together.
No, you don't do it at the same time. You squirt and then you wipe. You squirt and then wipe. Come on.
No, man, no.
Oh my god. This is the most disturbing thing that we've ever recorded.
Hey, mine's got a hairdryer, or not a hairdryer. I suppose it is.
Where's that picture?
Talk about your Freudian slip.
Yeah, okay, so I suppose it is.
That's awesome.
Hey, you're editing, so you got it all.
Okay, so wait. Let me make sure I understand this thing. This thing is like an add-on to your toilet, is what you were describing.
It's just so you basically
it's like a fancy seat.
You take off the lid, you take off the seat and the close lid thing, and it's basically a replacement seat and lid.
Right,
and
so
you plug
it's
it
a
in.
fancy seat.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's good. We've had it for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Sounds like it'd be a mess.
Oh, no, not at all. It will shoot you off the toilet the first time you do it. Though,
Oh my god!
you won't be ready for it.
All right,
Whoa!
I put the counter in the episode
Are
or
we-
in the show notes thing.
are we
The
starting?
comments there. It's got a hair dryer. That might be the best comment. Accidental comment.